All right, let's talk about something we've all seen, right? A government rolls out some big, bold new plan. There are press conferences, lots of promises, but then you look around a few years later and you have to ask, what actually changed? Today, we are diving right into that frustrating gap between the grand vision and the messy, complicated reality of getting things done. And this quote, man, it just cuts right through all the noise, doesn't it? It grounds the whole conversation. Because while officials are in comfortable rooms debating policy points and mapping out 5-year visions, the real-world consequences of not getting it right are happening right now. This isn't just about reports and documents. It's about a kid showing up to school with an empty stomach. So what kicked all this off? Well, it was a recent announcement. And if you follow politics or policy, it's a story you've probably heard a dozen times before. So, on November 20th, 2025, the Meghalaya government, working with the World Food Program, unveiled a brand new 5-year vision for food security. Now, on the surface, that sounds pretty good. You know, who can argue with that? But it also raises this huge red flag, this classic question. Are we just substituting the act of planning for actual, meaningful action? And that leads you to a really interesting question. I mean, if we already have a pretty good idea of what the problems are, and we even have some old plans on the shelf, why is the go-to move always to create another brand new vision? Well, the political math here is actually pretty simple. Announcing a vision gets you headlines, you get a nice photo op, it makes it look like you're taking bold action. But the real work, the execution, oh, that is hard, it's slow, it's messy, it's thankless, and it happens far, far away from any TV cameras. You know, there's actually a term for this whole dynamic. It's called the tyranny of metrics. And it makes perfect sense when you think about it. It's super easy to prove you created a plan. You can hold it up. See? Here's the 100-page report. But proving you've actually reduced hunger, that's way harder to measure. So organizations and governments often drift towards the thing they can easily measure, making the plan, to avoid being held accountable for the outcome that really matters. Okay, so let's step away from the conference rooms and the vision documents for a second. Let's look at the actual reality on the ground that this new plan is supposed to fix. Because the official data, well, it tells a pretty shocking story. Almost half. Just let that sink in. According to the National Family Health Survey, 46.5%, nearly 1 out of every 2 children under 5 in Meghalaya, is stunted. That means because of long-term malnutrition, their bodies and their brains are not developing to their full potential. That's a staggering number. And it gets worse. On top of that, nearly 12% of children are suffering from what's called wasting. That's acute malnutrition. We're talking about a severe, life-threatening condition that requires immediate intervention. And this isn't just affecting the youngest kids. Almost a third of women in their childbearing years have a body mass index that's below normal. This isn't just about their own health. It creates a devastating cycle where malnourished mothers are more likely to have malnourished children, passing the crisis from one generation to the next. Now, when you see numbers like that, your first thought is probably, wow, they must not have any policies in place to deal with this. But, and this is where it gets really frustrating, that's just not true. The problem isn't a lack of ideas on paper. The truth is, the toolbox is already full. We have powerful, nationwide schemes that are supposed to prevent exactly this. You've got the public distribution system for subsidized food, the ICDS for mothers and kids, the midday meal scheme at schools, even MGNREGA to make sure people have the money to buy food. The tools are there. And this right here is the massive disconnect. You have a scheme for food grains, but you have widespread malnutrition. You have programs for child nutrition, but nearly half of all kids are stunted. You have a plan for purchasing power, yet almost a third of women are underweight. This isn't a vision problem. It is a huge, glaring execution problem. So it seems pretty clear that the issue is a failure of delivery, not a failure of design. So what do we do about it? Well, maybe the first step is for all of us to start asking some sharper, more pointed questions every single time one of these new visions gets announced. First and foremost, we already have a National Food Security Act. We have all those schemes we just talked about. So what exactly is this new 5-year vision going to tell us that we don't already know? What critical piece of information is missing that requires another round of planning? Second, let's talk accountability. This surely isn't the first vision document they've ever made. So let's ask, what happened to the last one? How about the one from 2020 or 2015? What did they promise to do, and how many of those targets were actually hit? Because a track record of getting things done ought to matter a whole lot more than a track record of making announcements.
And finally, you have to follow the money. How much did this new vision document cost to produce? How much was spent on consultants, on workshops in fancy hotels, on printing glossy reports? And then ask the really important question. Could that money have been better spent just feeding people?
At the end of the day, it all boils down to something really simple. The challenge was never a lack of vision. The challenge has always been turning those words on a page into food on a plate. Because more visions and more plans won't feed hungry children. Better implementation will.